America is home to a centuries-old legend, a hominid creature known by many names: Sasquatch, Yeti, the Woodsman, and the most popular name of all, Bigfoot. Tonight on the Dark Waters channel, we travel into the world of Bigfoot and attempt to pull off a historic collaboration where Bigfoot truth seekers combine forces to share stories and encounters from around the world. Tonight we proudly present the Bigfoot Bonanza.
I've worked forest fire mitigation and emergency management for the past 30 years. The incident I'm sharing with you has never been told to anyone except my wife, as I didn't want to run the risk of losing my contracts with the state of California. The average person knows very little about how fire works. Once a wildfire starts, it takes on a life and personality of its own. Some fires just creep along and smolder. These can be easily escaped as long as you stay ahead of them. Other wildfires with massive amounts of surface fuel and tree canopy grow into what I like to call flowing dragons. These fires move extremely fast, covering thousands of acres in a day. These dragons move so fast that the heat reaches such extremes that roadways are melted, often blocking any escape route available. This is the situation I found myself in when I had my life-changing encounter with Bigfoot. My crew was digging a control line ahead of one of the largest wildfires in the history of the state. Crew and I were out working, running bulldozers, trying to remove as much of the ground foliage as possible as a means of slowing down the fire. All morning, the winds were working in our favor, and the fire was over 1,500 acres away from us. Things had been going well until a call came in over the radio that the weather prediction was for the winds to shift south by southwest, and with gusts of 45 miles per hour. This meant that the fire would close in on us fast, and we needed to get all of our equipment out of the area. With 25 men and 10 bulldozers spread out over a 5-mile stretch of woods, this was going to be a hell of a task. I radioed my foreman, letting him know that danger was imminent, and we needed to start the evacuation procedures. Soon the word spread. Men were loading dozers on the beds of trucks near the highway. As I started to do the head count, I discovered that we were down a man. Asking around, he was last seen 2 miles back, headed into the trees to relieve himself. By now, you could see smoke from the fire in the distance, which was a sign that we were way too close. So I told the rest of the boys to ride out while I went back in my pickup truck to look for him. Imagine driving along in an area that had been cleared, the size of 2 football fields wide, with trees on both sides. Smoke slowly rolling in above the trees, blocking out the sun. That is what it looked like by the time I got my boys on the road and was headed back to look for the other crew member. I had rode no more than 3.5 miles when a call came over the radio that they found him. By now, you could smell smoke in the cabin of my truck. I knew it was only a matter of about 30 minutes before the flames would be upon me and I would be dead. So I gunned it, spinning the truck and heading out of the area. Halfway down the clearing, I hit something, and it punctured holes in both my passenger tires. The sound of tires popping and simultaneously the sinking of the right-hand side of my truck made me feel like I was in some type of horror movie. I radioed Roger, my second in command, telling him that I would need him to meet me back at the highway entrance. But his reply made my heart drop. The fire had accelerated at a pace that made it impossible for them to get to me. The roads had been blocked by the state police. This meant no help was coming from me, and I was on my own. Well, I'll be damned. I'm on the side of the road with 2 blown-out tires and fire closing in on me from behind. This was a dire situation, so I drove the trucks on the flats as far and as fast as I could. I made it about another 3 miles down the road before sparks started to fly from the rims. Then the vehicle started to lose traction and slide off the road. DW. At this point, man, I knew I was going to die. I had slid down the hillside, and my truck was lodged between 2 trees. The impact tossed me from the driver's seat up against the passenger side window, and I could feel the blood oozing out of my head. To make things worse, I must have been unconscious for a while, because I looked around, there was smoke everywhere. Now, for the record, This was the absolute worst situation I could have been in. You see, fire travels faster downhill, and smoke accumulates in low places. So if the fumes from the smoke didn't kill me, the heat from the fire would ignite my gas tank and blow me into pieces. Man, I was in a bad way. Confused, dazed, I tried to get out of the truck and finally resorted to kicking the windshield. As soon as I was able to break the glass, smoke came rushing into the cabin, choking me. I could now hear the flames from the fire in the distance. All I could do was keep kicking and trying to break it out. The smoke began to overwhelm me, and I felt the truck shifting. Then for sure, something pulled the truck backwards from between the two trees. Next, the passenger side door began to bulge, and I saw this huge hand grab the door and pull it open. At that moment, I began to black out, but I could feel someone grab me and pulling me out of the truck. The events that followed are still a blur, but I remember these moments of brief consciousness when I was being carried over the shoulders of this huge, hairy creature. It took these leaping steps that violently shook my body. When I came to again, I was laying on the side of the road. There was no smoke anywhere in sight, and this creature was nowhere to be found. Reaching in my pocket, I had my radio, and when I contacted my foreman, he sounded surprised that I was alive. To this day, I never shared this story with anyone except for my wife. So many people want to kill these creatures to prove they exist. And yes, like us humans, there are some psychopathic Sasquatch out there. But my experience was the exact opposite. This creature saved my life, and I only wish there was a way to say thank you. It is important that I share with you some background information prior to telling you of my encounter. 3 years ago, I was in the midst of my divorce, and things had gotten super ugly. So I asked my friend Jeff if I could head out to a piece of property he owned for a few days of fishing. I grew up in the woods, and the smell of fresh air was the best thing for me. I felt trapped, almost as if the walls were closing in on me, and life was spinning out of control. Anytime I got to that point, I would just retreat to the woods and get back to nature. It had a way of cleansing me. Jeff agreed to allow me to use his property and told me that he would meet me there the next day after he had finished his work week. This property was picture perfect. It was 5 miles away from the nearest highway, and he had to follow a dirt access road to get to the fishing pond and campground area. Driving into the campsite, the pond was on the left-hand side of the road. On the right-hand side of the road was a 33-foot-long RV. Right where the road stopped was a picnic table and an iron grill that had been cemented into the ground. Exiting the car, I was so excited to have some time alone and really needed the peace and quiet. The divorce had taken its toll on me both mentally and physically. I opened the trunk of my car and got my fishing supplies and set them near the pond. Then I went to the RV and started moving my food and beer into the refrigerator. I had only a few tasks before I could get to fishing, and that was to get the generator running and the propane hooked up. So I called Jeff and asked him to walk me through the process. Now I've known Jeff for the past 15 years, and he has a rather playful personality. So at times it's hard to tell when he's being serious. While on the phone, he told me something strange, and looking back, I wish I had taken him seriously. When he was walking me through connecting a propane tank, he said, "Hey, make sure that the first couple of fish you catch, you toss it to the reeds for the protector of the woods." He said it so casually, it didn't even register in my mind at all. However, later that night, I would have an encounter with this protector of the woods that left me shaking and hesitant to go in the woods ever again. As night fell, I had just gotten multiple fish lines into the water, and my plan was to sit out by the fire and have a few beers. I was on the phone with my girlfriend talking about the trip to the property when I heard a tree limb break. But this was no small limb. It was huge. Grabbing my flashlight, I quickly scanned the direction the sound came from, and less than 50 yards away from me was this huge, broken tree limb. It looked shredded, as if something had twisted it, and it just popped open. Initially, I thought it was a black bear. They're everywhere in these parts. But when I realized the limb was 11 to 12 feet in the air, it just left me confused. After that breaking noise, I began to get this weird vibe. Call it hunter's intuition or just primal instincts, but I knew something was out there. Now feeling completely uncomfortable, I quickly moved into the RV and turned off the lights and locked the door behind me. Amidst the dead silence, my girlfriend's panicked voice seemed to bellow through the phone as she begged me to tell her what was going on. Just as I opened my mouth to answer her, there was an impact on the side of the RV. It slid and was lifted up on its side, tossing me into the wall. Whatever this thing was, it had just rammed a 30-foot long, 10-foot tall RV and hit it like a football tackling sled. Then it dropped it, jostling my body from left to right. At this point, I was scared out of my mind. Then it climbed on the roof. How do I know it was on the roof? Because as it stepped, it made indentions, and you could hear the metal roof giving in to the massive weight of this creature. In that moment, I thought I was going to die. I just knew this creature was going to jump down and rip the door off and come get me. I scrambled to the front of the RV as it shadowed my movements above. Then finally, I remembered I had a cell phone in my hand and I could call for help. So I hung up with my girlfriend and called Jeff, who owned the property. Hey, there's a monster out here, bro, and it's on the roof. You need to get here and bring some guns now. He laughed, thinking I was playing. No, this shit is real. It's not a game, bro. There's a monster on the roof. Jeff tried to calm me down, and he told me he would be on his way. But I was not calming down. The panic attack was only getting worse. When we hung up the phone, I called my girlfriend back and filled her in on everything that had transpired. Then she asked me the most simple question. It seemed so logical in that moment of panic. Do you have your car keys? And can you leave? Now, DW, this is where my story is going to sound like straight BS, but I swear this is true. I sat there for the next 15 minutes debating in my mind, should I run for the car or should I just wait? Waiting could mean death. At any moment, this thing could break down a door. But going outside was equally as dangerous, and I could probably die even quicker. I decided to make a run for it. So I bolted out of the door and sprinted the 25 yards back to the campground where I parked the car. When I hopped in and turned the ignition, the car was dead. What the Now I had to run back to the RV, and as I did, I just knew something was going to grab me at any moment. Reaching that RV, I was defeated. I had no choice but to wait on Jeff. I was in the middle of nowhere, and something was tackling the RV like it was Ray Lewis. I spent the next hour on the phone with my girlfriend trying to calm her down and attempting to keep my emotions under control. Finally, I heard the sound of Jeff's pickup truck coming down the road. We had to stand there in the dark while jump-starting my car. Then we both got the hell out of there. When he returned the next day, he said the RV looked like a truck ran into the left side of it, and the fishing lines were pulled out of the water. He saw a pile of fish heads laid near the wood line. Later that year, Jeff sold the property after he and his father had their own encounter with that creature. Dark Waters. The story I'm about to share with you was told to me by my grandfather. To give you some background information, I was born and raised in Alberta, Canada. I spent my childhood years with my grandparents, as both my mother and father were preoccupied with the carnal pleasures of life. One evening, my grandfather and I found ourselves on the side of the road with a flat tire, and while I stood there holding a flashlight, we began to hear this strange sound coming from the wood line across from us. I had never known my grandfather to be afraid of anything, but that evening, he made me get back into the truck, and we drove the next 2 to 3 miles into town on a flat tire. Once we reached the service station, Grandpa changed the tire, and we headed home. Now, never knowing my grandfather to show any fear, I was confused, and I just had to ask him, why did we drive off? That is when he shared this story with me. When he was a young man, no more than 25 years old, He and his best friend Jacob went night fishing in one of the local lakes. As they sat there, anchored near the middle of the lake, they began to hear this sound. Grandpa described it as 100 dogs barking at the same time, and then the loudest howl he had ever heard. This was accompanied by a yelling sound that morphed into something similar to an air raid horn. Then all hell broke loose, and it sounded like two freight trains headed in the same direction, plowing through the woods. Suddenly, out of the wood line stepped the largest wolf they had ever seen, rising up on his back 2 legs and walking like a man. This thing was massive, and it stood there with his back turned to them, staring into the woods. In the spur of the moment, an ape-like creature jumped out of the wood line, his mammoth arms stretched high above his head, smashing into the wolf, making the most unimaginable sound, a symphony of flesh tearing and bone breaking. The sheer force of the impact catapulted both of them into the water, causing waves to radiate outward, creating chaos on the otherwise smooth surface of the calm lake. The ape-like creature's arms thrashed violently, plunging into the water over and over again in a fit of rage. Then, in one final gesture, it thrusted both arms beneath the surface, twisting, turning, and jerking the head of the wolf from underneath the waves. Then it turned, taking 3 steps, gliding back into the wood line and letting out a thundering roar. Grandpa said that ever since that night, he was aware of what dangers truly lurked in the woods, and he made a point of not tempting fate ever again. What's up, everybody? It's your boy Dark Waters coming to you real quickly. This won't be the normal Inside Baseball because Inside Baseball takes so long for videos to render, and I want to get a video out to you guys Friday, which is tonight. So I'm going to do the Inside Baseball talking about all these stories, and I'm going to drop it Monday, partly because I want to remind you guys about the interviews I have Monday and Tuesday, and then also there's a couple other stories I need to get done so I can stack up. But these were some great stories, some great Bigfoot stories, and I hope you guys really, really enjoyed them. The image on your screen right now is talking about what's going on. You can see the display of the t-shirts that will be coming on sale real soon, which I think they're nice. On the left-hand side, you will see the upcoming interviews, Paranormal Reality, and Arcane Radio with Lon Strickland. So, guys, I really want you guys to call into these interviews. Call in and talk to me. These interviews are an opportunity for us to communicate, for massive groups of you guys to communicate with me. That's why I'm holding off the Inside Baseball. I'll drop it that same day. That way you won't forget. Bada bing, bada boom. All right, so love you guys. Thank you so much for swimming in the dark waters. To the new subscribers, thank you, thank you, thank you. To my family who's been around, you know I love you, and it's always love. Peace.